Okay, and welcome everyone to today's session. Patrick O'Gorman is your presenter, and he is a technology specialist serving our state and local government customers. We also have a few technology specialists available to answer questions in the chat today. And Patrick's going to be diving into ALM principles and demonstrate tools like GitHub Actions and Azure DevOps, the pipeline configuration tool, and the Power Platform command line interface, and show you how they can assist in your development and deployment workflows. We aim to provide a digital event today that respects all individuals, so I ask that everyone assist in providing a welcoming and safe environment for everyone. We bring 3 of these events to our customers each month. If you have an idea for a topic that you would like us to consider in the schedule, go ahead and drop that in the chat, and I'll jot those down and bring those to the lead team. And to minimize any distractions or potential background noise today, we are going to leverage the chat for questions. Post your questions there. We've got people here answering during the presentation, and if we have time at the end, I'll unmute the lines and we'll take some questions live as well. And then I do send an email with the recording and the deck with all the links to the resources that Patrick's going to walk through today. And that email will come from myself, devictor@microsoft.com, on tomorrow or Monday. So with that, I am going to hand it over to Patrick. Thank you so much for bringing this amazing topic to our customers today so they can get the most out of their business application investment. So over to you, Patrick. Thank you so much.
You bet. Thanks, Deb. And hi, everyone. Thanks for coming today. We are going to take a little bit of a different spin on a demo I've done a couple of times now. If you joined us maybe late last year, we did kind of a high level on ALM and the Power Platform. And we'll certainly touch on a lot of those fundamental concepts that we covered last time, make sure we're doing a level set. We're all on the same page there. But then instead of, I believe last time we took more of a look at the pipelines configuration tool. This time we're going to look more kind of at the pro code side of things. We're going to take a look at how we can actually use the CLI and how some of that stuff looks under the covers. By that stuff, I mean YAML, the YAML pipelines, which are in GitHub Actions and Azure DevOps. First, we'll do a quick introduction, though, so you know who I am, and then I'm going to go off camera to save some bandwidth. But Patrick O'Gorman, as we said, I'm a technical specialist. I've been working with Microsoft technologies my entire career. Started out as a .NET developer and got introduced to SharePoint and Dynamics sometime 10 years probably after that. So yeah, as it says there, focus on the Power Platform. I've been married to my wife for 23 years now. Got an 18-year-old and a 16-year-old, 2 daughters there. One's in college, one's a sophomore in high school. You got Wrigley on the left there and Tilly on the right. Two parts of our family there, our furry parts of our family. I was born in Houston, Texas, but I quickly moved to New Braunfels, Texas, where I am currently at now. And if you don't know where New Braunfels is, it's about an hour south of Austin, or about 45 minutes north of San Antonio. So it's already nice and hot down here. So with that said, let's dive into things. We'll take a look at our agenda here. And as I mentioned, I'm going to go off camera because I'm already getting notifications here. So the first thing we want to do is level set. We'll go over some definitions and strategies. We're going to talk about our deployment options. There's a whole lot of deployment options there. I'll certainly give you my recommendations and suggestions on when to use what. And then, of course, we're going to sprinkle in some demo at the end of our session here. And then we'll definitely leave some room for Q&A at the end. All right, so definitions and strategies. If you're not familiar with these are probably your core 4 definitions that you should know as you kind of embark on your ALM journey here with the Power Platform. Solutions. So solutions, they're everything for ALM. They carry all of your configurations, which consist of metadata, different types of files. If you ever crack one open, if you ever save one to your file system and crack one open, it's really just a zip file with a bunch of stuff in it. You can crack that open and you can see, the XML that makes up your schema. If you have any web resources in there like HTML files or CSS files, those get stuck in there as well. Your app definitions, flow definitions now, lots of things are solution aware. And when we say solution aware, that's just saying that, hey, this is a component that we've built on the Power Platform that we're able to move around from environment to environment in a solution file. Environments we've talked about, they're basically kind of containers on the platform. They have their own Dataverse database. You can have your own publishers to create your solutions and really keep things in your own logical space. So if you have a specific project and you don't want anyone else messing with your data schema or messing with your apps or anything like that, you can certainly spin up your own environment and keep that just as your own working area. And we'll talk about environment strategy here in a second. That's where we start to see things like a dev, a test, and a production environment, so that we have those specific, kind of like we used to when we were pushing out code when we'd be building websites and whatnot. And we'll talk about all that here in a second. Source control should be your source of truth for storing and collaborating on your customizations. We've seen source control around for ages, back in the Visual Source Safe days, and now we use tools like GitHub. And so, if you're not, I strongly encourage you to use source control for your Power Platform solutions. I know everyone thinks, they're in the cloud, they're safe. That's by and large true, but you can never be too sure. So I always encourage folks to back up their solution files. And then, of course, deployments. I mentioned this a second ago. It's the Power Platform version of pushing code to production, like we've done all these years building websites and whatnot, other types of apps. Dive into solutions a little more here. As we mentioned, they're containers for your Power Platform components, all of your configurations, your app definitions, lots of metadata, etc. They're how you install those changes to target environments as well. And so we'll look at two types of solutions on the Power Platform, and those are unmanaged and managed. And so if you're thinking about your dev environment, you're making a lot of changes, you've got a lot of people who are messing with things, trying to get things right. We're working in what are known as unmanaged solutions. Unmanaged solutions can be changed. Sorry, I was reading the chat there, but yeah, unmanaged solutions can be changed. When we push a solution downstream to a downstream environment to say test or production, we don't want people messing with those components. We want that to be kind of locked up and don't have to worry about people getting in there and messing with our code or our configurations or our web resources or whatever we might have deployed in that solution. So we deploy those as managed. In fact, some of our tools, like our pipeline configuration tool, it by default will deploy your solution as managed. So you don't even have to think about it. Just by configuring that pipeline in that pipeline configuration tool, setting your solution to be deployed, to a test or a production environment, it's going to handle that for you and export it and re-import it as a managed solution. A couple more slides about solutions, and then I'll pause for questions here. But you'll see a few types of solution strategies. I was actually talking to a gentleman this morning who said that they have a major project that has 12 solutions in it right now, and I was blown away because I think the most I've ever seen were 4 or 5. But a horizontal solution strategy could look something like this, where you may have your visual components in one solution, you may have reports and security roles in a different solution, you may have one big solution that has all of your entities, your option sets, extensions, etc., dashboards, everything that makes up that data schema, if you will, your forms and views. That's one approach. Another approach that we often see is the vertical solution strategy, and this is where you see something like this, kind of like the object-oriented programming days where we see inheritance. And so, whereas we don't have true inheritance, we can certainly use things like a base layer of components and then build components on top of those and other solutions. You can also see a hybrid of those, and I do hybrid solutions all the time where I'll start out with a base layer of components, and then I may have components that sit on top of that base layer, but then I may have a whole nother solution altogether for my Power Automate cloud flows, because I don't want to have to, send out a whole new deployment with all my cloud flows in it if I'm just changing the name of a field or something like that. So I want to break those solutions up so it makes a little more sense. And before I move on to talk a little bit about environment strategy, are there any questions about solution strategy or what we've talked about so far with solutions? Solutions are key to ALM, so I want to make sure we all understand that. All right, I'm gonna keep moving. All right, so environment strategy 101. And so when I think about environment strategy, I try not to overcomplicate things. A lot of organizations are still, really getting going on their Power Platform journey. Some are pretty mature at this point, and they've got environment strategies in place, and that's great. They've got governance in place, that's great. But I look at it really as three different things: either a productivity level app, where I'm maybe building something for myself. I might need some automations or just something to clean up my inbox. Uh, those are things I'm going to do in what's known as the default environment. Most people have access. I believe everyone has access to the default environment, unless your administrators have done something to shut that down. And you should be able to build, personal productivity type automations and apps in that environment. Next level is going to be those more important apps. They're not critical to business necessarily, but they're pretty important maybe for a team project or something that your team likes to do internally that could use some automation. As mentioned there in that bullet there, ALM, not really necessary, but you could certainly implement it and have that peace of mind that your solutions, your configurations are getting backed up. And then, of course, mission critical scenarios, high complexity type, organization wide type applications owned by IT oftentimes. And yes, definitely want to put a robust ALM process in place there where you're looking at, a minimum of these three environments: a dev, a test, and a production. And then here's some example environment strategies. As I talked about, everyone has access to this default environment. This is where we see, people building, like I mentioned, personal productivity type applications and flows. A developer environment, sort of a new treat that we've got to the Power Platform. It's great for things like building Power Pages and not having to worry about those expiring. You just have to keep that developer environment active. And then, of course, the more common one that I see is down here on line 4, this dev, test, and prod. We see this all over. We see this get a little more complicated from time to time when we have multiple developers working on a single stream of work. So you may see something like you see in this last item, but more often than not, we're going to see something pretty simple like dev, test, and prod. All right. Any questions about environments or solutions before we jump into our deployment options? All right, I don't see anything in the chat. I just wanted to have a second to check that. So, okay, so deployment options. All right, so of course, the first and foremost, we have manual deployments. And so solutions are manually exported from your source environment. You can see the little video going on in the background there. I'm actually going into my environment. I'm clicking on my solutions node, and I'm actually, going through the process of selecting, various options before I'm able to actually export that solution. It's cumbersome. It involves you downloading that file to, a file system or somewhere where you can have access to it to then re-upload it. But it's a way to get things done, and it's the way we did things for a long time. So manual deployments are certainly still an option, and certainly something we use, often. So comes a little bit of a pain though. The ALM accelerator. I left this in here just in case people are still using it or if people are familiar with it. I think we're kind of phasing it out. I don't know if that's like official or not, but I know there's a strategic shift to getting customers to use the pipeline configuration tool. It's a much more friendly tool, user-friendly tool. It kind of takes away that kind of clunkiness of having a whole nother application, which is this Canvas app that you're looking at. Takes that out of the equation and just puts the controls that you need right there in your Maker Studio, so that you have access to them right there, where your solution is. And we'll obviously take a look at that here during the demo. Okay, so I mentioned the deployment pipeline configuration app, and that's kind of what we're pushing people to. It's a very user-friendly way to take the responsibility of deploying your solutions to a test environment, for example, out of the hands of IT. Instead of having to submit a request and wait for your IT department or whoever may be in charge of that to actually execute that deployment for you, you can do that yourself. The IT department, your administrators, if you have pipeline administrators or pipeline, whoever manages that pipeline configuration app, they actually configure those pipelines. They build the pipelines so they know they have some control over what you're going to be using, but then that functionality is provided to you in the Maker Studio so that all you have to do basically is click a button and say, hey, I'm ready to deploy this. So it's really kind of a two-part process. The administrator sets up the pipelines, and then the end user gets to consume those in their Maker Studio. Uh, Real quick, just wanted to show the end user experience. I'm going to jump back one slide really quick. So this experience here on the right, this is the model-driven app that an administrator would use to actually come in and deploy or configure their pipelines. Rather, you can configure environments and pipelines. You can dig up your solution artifacts from past deployments that you've done, which would be like your managed solution or your unmanaged solution. And then, sorry, I wanted to go back to that one just so I could make note of that. And then this one is the end user experience. And so this is if you're in your Maker Studio, you're working in your solution, you have another little node down here now that says pipelines, and all you've got to do is pick which pipeline you want to use and basically click deploy, and it's going to do its thing from there. Very intuitive. You know, very I remember the days where we would have to wait, oftentimes till like a Friday. That was our special deployment days, and we would have to sit around all week waiting for those deployments to go out, and now that's a thing of the past. So I wanted to throw this in here in case you've seen it. Some of our customers, some of you on this call might be on commercial, but this is not in GCC yet. Hopefully it's coming soon. I don't have a date, but I wanted to at least put it in here. And this is because a lot of times people say, hey, this pipeline tool is great. We want to use it, but it doesn't really give us the option to back up our source control. And right out of the box, that might be true. There are things you can configure though with pre-deployment type steps and Power Automate to get your code into source control. But we're going to make it even easier on you. And so, as I mentioned, I believe it's actually in preview and commercial, so it's probably a little bit later this year before it makes it to GCC. But you will, right under that pipeline node that we just looked at, have another little node there for source control. And you can see, if you were watching this, it's as simple as it recognizes my changes right there in my solution, and it allows me to do a commit, which I'll do, and I'll add some notes there. And then you can see over here on my right-hand side in Azure DevOps, it is actually connected, you can see there, to that repo in Azure DevOps, and it just loads all those changes right up into Azure DevOps for me. So that's going to be a real nice addition when it makes it to GCC. And if you've already got it in commercial, I highly recommend checking it out and starting to use it. It's great tool. Yes, source controls for managed environments. That's true. Okay, so as I mentioned, I wanted to talk mostly about the CLI and what I call YAML pipelines. That's not just me, that's what they're called, YAML pipelines. And so, as I mentioned at the beginning, YAML pipelines are your Azure DevOps pipelines and your GitHub Actions pipelines. Basically the pipelines that we use YAML to configure with. And so we all know what pipelines are at this point. Allows for the automation of common build and deployment tasks. A lot of people don't realize that you can actually use them for provisioning or deprovisioning environments, packing and unpacking solutions, of course. That's part of actually getting your configurations changes into source control. But provisioning or deprovisioning of environments is really good for those situations that where you might have multiple developers working on the same stream of work on a daily basis and needing to kind of give them a fresh environment with a fresh deployment of the latest code changes or latest configuration changes, every morning to work in. So that's where that stuff comes in handy. You can see over on your right the screenshot of what it looks like. What I try to call out with Azure DevOps is that you don't need to necessarily know how to write YAML. It certainly helps to know little syntactical things that may mess you up, like indenting wrong or something like that. But the good thing about the designer or the editor rather, is that it'll tell you if you've made one of those minor mistakes. But as far as actually knowing what to type, we make it really easy on you, and we give you these Power Platform build tools. And so over here on the right, you can see in my tasks, I basically typed in Power Platform so I could search on all the different Power Platform tools that I have available to me, and that's the list I get. And so all I have to do at that point is decide, okay, maybe I want the Power Platform checker. I can click on that and drag and drop it over onto my editor here, and it'll write all that code for me. Now, in some cases, there's some parameters you may need to set, like obviously where it says PMOG dev, I set that. That's a key that I set. So I will set that before I drag it over. But then once I drag it over and drop it onto the editor, those values are there for me. So oftentimes people say, I don't want to use Azure DevOps pipelines. They're intimidating. I don't know how to write YAML. You don't need to know how to write YAML. So that's a good thing. GitHub Actions are very similar to Azure DevOps. They both use YAML, but they both work just a little bit differently under the covers, and we'll take a look at that here in a second. But once again, it allows for the automation of common build tasks. At its core, it's using the same technologies as the Azure DevOps. We're using the Power Platform CLI, the command line interface, and we'll talk about that here a little more in a few minutes. GitHub Actions doesn't have the Power Platform build tools, so it is pure YAML. You're typing in pure YAML. Some people will write their pipelines, build their pipelines, making actual CLI calls in their pipelines, whereas some people will actually use what are known as the GitHub Actions, GitHub Power Platform Actions, and that's what I'll show you today. We'll look at the CLI actually in the terminal. So, but yeah, so GitHub Actions, seems like everyone's going to GitHub these days, but I know that a lot of companies, a lot of organizations have a lot invested in Azure DevOps, and that's a great tool as well. So it really comes down to, if you're thinking about YAML pipelines, which one you're going to use. It really I think it comes down to what your organization is most comfortable with, what you're most efficient in, and where your investments already are. So here's kind of a crazy looking screen. I'll just point out that on the right-hand side of this screen is GitHub YAML, and on the left-hand side is Azure DevOps YAML. And so just to reiterate that, I put some little colorful text up here, Azure DevOps. And these two pipelines do the same thing, okay? And so the first thing I wanted to point out is they both have a tool installer. So the lines of code there that are not covered up, that's the Power Platform tool installer. That's always going to be how you start your Power Platform pipelines, is installing those tools. Okay, and you can see the syntax is just a little bit different. The second thing I'll point out is they're both doing an export solution. Again, the syntax is a little bit different. One thing I'll point out here for Azure DevOps is this build.artifact staging directory. Those are system variables. Those are predefined variables that you have access to. There's a whole list of them that you can look up and have access to and use those in your pipeline. So really, really handy variables that are already defined for you in there. You can see here we have an unpack solution. That's basically, remember we talked about a solution is a zip file. So that unpack is basically saying, hey, I want to unzip this. I want to take all of these files out that make up this solution and individually stick them into my repository to back them up. Great. All right. And so then the remainder of the code at the bottom there is just some Git code that's actually pushing those changes to the repository, to the main branch there. And so people often ask, why do they look so different? If they're both YAML and YAML is supposed to be standardized, why do they look so different? And what it comes down to is this first item here. Azure DevOps is built on Microsoft's Azure Pipelines engine. It says, as it says there, it's more rigid, it's more enterprise oriented in structure. It's designed to integrate deeply with Azure and TFS. Whereas the GitHub Actions is built on its own workflow engine that's tightly integrated into GitHub. It's designed to be lightweight, event-driven, and super flexible. That probably doesn't surprise anyone coming from GitHub. So a couple other things to point out there. Azure DevOps, it can use a few different tools for source control. Azure repos, which are really just Azure hosted Git repositories. Of course, GitHub repos, GitHub Enterprise Server repos, and Bitbucket repos, whereas GitHub Actions are only going to be able to use, those native GitHub repos. Visual Designer we talked about, and Azure DevOps, Visual Designer for building pipelines, whereas in the GitHub Actions, it's YAML only. And then in Azure DevOps, we have those Power Platform build tools that I showed you, whereas in GitHub Actions, it's really just either straight up CLI commands or the GitHub Power Platform Actions, which are really just wrappers around those CLI commands. All right, so I've included some helpful links in here as well. And before we move now over to the demo, are there any questions?
Hey, Patrick, there
Yes.
are quite a few in the chat, but I'm doing a good job getting to them. There's one, though, I wanted to ask you about.
Sure.
Is there a way to restrict people from selecting certain publishers in the platform?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I would have to dig into that.
I did not either, so
I
that'll be
my first blush is that no, because if they have access to that environment and they're able to create solutions, I've never seen a way to restrict the list of publishers in that environment, but I don't know that I've ever actually looked into that either. So I'd have to dig into that a little. Great question though. Okay, let me pull up my script here. There we go. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to point out here in the Maker Studio is we're going to take a look basically at a couple different environments. Then we're going to look at a couple different pipelines, and then we're going to look at the pipeline tool, and we're going to show how it all kind of works, and then we'll hopefully wrap up with seeing the CLI in action. But to point out, you'll notice here, this is OGDW Core Dev. The key here is the -dev at the end. The other environment we're going to be working with today is the -test. So basically named the exact same thing. I probably have it open right here. Yep, OGDW Core Test. And so we're going to basically make a change to one of the solution files there and show how we can push that through to first of all how we can back it up to source control in both Azure DevOps and in GitHub. But then we're going to get really brave and try to deploy it to our test environment using the CLI alone. So fingers crossed this all works. All right, so we're here in the dev environment. I'm going to come down here to my solutions, and I'm going to work in this core components. And remember, we talked about the different solution strategies. You can see here, I've got this core component solution. I've also got a core automations, and then I've got a core apps solution. And so I try to break things out that way when I'm kind of dealing with that core layer. And so we're going to deal with OGDW core components though. And we're going to come in here, and you can see, I'm going to move my camera here a little bit. There we go. And so you can see here we've got basically 6 tables and a bunch of other components in here, or a few other components, I should say. We're going to come down here and we're going to take a look at this list of tables, and we're just simply going to say we're going to create a new table. And we are going to name this accident. Oops, my caps lock on. 1 second. Accident. And we'll go ahead and save that. Just with all the defaults, we're not doing anything fancy here. Okay, so we should be good there. That's all we really wanted to do, was add that table and of course publish our customizations. And so if we take a look now over here at our test environment and we dig down into our solutions, and we can pull up, remember we talked about these tools by default. Oftentimes by default we'll depending on which tool you're using is why I say oftentimes, but we'll deploy them as managed. And so here you can see that our OGDW core components is here listed under our managed, and we'll crack that open, and you can see the warning message up here. You cannot directly edit the components within a managed solution. That's great. But more notably, we can see that we don't have an accidents table in here. And we do here. So we're still publishing those. So we'll just give that 1 more second to finish publishing. And while that's finishing publishing, good deal. That looks like that's done. We'll hop over here to Azure DevOps. And remember, we've got a few different ways that we can move our solutions around. But the first thing we always want to do is back up our configurations to source control. And so this is my Azure DevOps project. Inside of this project, I've got my repositories. I'm going to click on repositories. And you can see here my solutions, my OG DevWorks core component solution. I've actually got them exported as both unmanaged and managed. There's not a real science to that. I like to do it. In some, there's really no rhyme or reason to it. Some customers prefer that we do it, and some can just work with that unmanaged, because ultimately they can build their own managed, just coming from the unmanaged source code. So, but I like putting them both in there, and it kind of shows off that functionality as well. So, but you can dig in here and you can see, this is what it looks like when we crack open one of these solution files. You can see my entities, which are my tables. We've actually renamed them to tables, but kind of left them named entities in the solution file. But you can see here as well, there's maintenance, route, service offering, but there's no accident. And so we want to get that new table into source control. And so we can come over here to our pipelines, and you notice we have two pipelines. We've got one called backup solutions and one called deploy to test. And so if we look at backup solutions, we'll click on edit here just so we can take a look at that YAML. It should look pretty familiar. This is kind of what we were looking at on the slide there. We've got our export solution. Oh, remember, our first thing is always to install our tools, but then we've got our export solution. We're going to go ahead and do a solution checker here just to make sure that solution's sound. And then we're going to do our unpack. And basically that's cracking it open and saying, hey, here's all the individual files. Now go do your thing and stick them into our repository there with these git commands. And so we're going to go ahead and run that. And we could sit here and watch it if we wanted to, but it's not super quick. It doesn't take super long either. We certainly have time on this on our call today, but we'll come back to it so you can see kind of all this outputted text that gets rendered over here on the right. So as we mentioned, we also have GitHub Actions that are also YAML based. And so what I did was I just switched over from Azure DevOps to GitHub. And so this is my GitHub environment, and this is my GitHub repository that I'm using for this, for the OG DevWorks core components. And so if I crack that open, it's going to look pretty familiar, right? We've got entities, option sets, others, web resources. And if I crack open entities, you can see there I've got my maintenance route, service offering, etc., but no accident table. And so we're going to want to back it up here as well. You normally wouldn't have two source control, two repositories, on two different products. I'm doing this, simply to demo both products for you. So in case anyone had that question, why are you backing it up to both places? Going back into here though, into my home page for this project, if you will, for this repository, if you will, and I click on this folder here, and you can see I've got another YAML file. And this one looks a little more intimidating than that last YAML file. Plus, we don't have that nice, that nice little drag and drop task bar over there on the right. But ultimately, it's going to do the same thing. It's going to go in and it's going to, first it's going to install the tools. Then it's going to go export that solution. Then it's going to unpack the solution. And then it's going to stick it into the repository. It should be pretty straightforward. So let's go back. We'll go back here to our actions. And we know this is our backup core solution to source control action. And we're going to go ahead and run that workflow. And once again, we will let that do its thing because that's not super quick either. But let's go back to pipelines. And it looks like pipelines now is doing its thing. We've got our tools are installed. We've exported our solution. It looks like it's running a checker right now on the solution, which is good. Looks like that went well. You can see now it's unpacking it. It's doing a checkout, and now it's pushing those changes to the main branch, finishing things up here. So if all went well, we should be able to hop back over to our repository and see our new table accident right there. So that is how easy it is to basically back up your configuration changes, your files to source control. It's also easy to do deployments from your source control, and so that's what this next pipeline does here. We'll hop back over to GitHub in 1 second, but this next pipeline deploy to test that's simply what that's going to do too. But we're not going to use that one today because we're going to try that with the PAC CLI. But just if you wanted to see it, because remember these commands underneath the covers are all using that PAC CLI. So when you see things like PAC solution, import solution, those commands are going to look really familiar when you see us typing them out in the terminal there. So let's hop back over here and see where this is. This is our GitHub environment. And it looks like it's still doing its thing. And just like we can with Azure DevOps, we can get in here and see what's going on, but it doesn't look like it's it looks like it's done, but oh, it is done. I missed that where it came in and told us it was done. So now we should be able to go back to our code, and we should be able to open our repo here and our entities folder, aka tables, and I don't see it. And why don't I? Oh, I know why. Okay. So I set this up a little differently, and I set this up so that it actually has a pull request, so that when we check that code in and we run that pipeline, it doesn't immediately go into that main branch. And so, if you're new to GitHub, if you're new to pull requests or working with ALM like this or source control like this, don't worry about it. You don't have to do this step. Whoops. I like to do it. I started out my career as a developer, so I have always just been in the habit of doing pull requests. And so basically I'm saying, hey, somebody other than me, the guy who wrote this code, somebody other than me, check this out and make sure it's good to go. And if it is, then you can commit it. And so now that we should have it committed, we should be able to go over here and see our accident table right there. Good deal. Okay. All right. So the last thing I wanted to walk through today, first of all, any questions about GitHub Actions or Azure DevOps? We're going to hop over to the CLI next. Okay. Okay. So remember what we were talking about. Everything is all this is built on the CLI. And so if you're not familiar with the CLI, it's really a lot of fun. It's not as intimidating as it looks. If you're not comfortable with command line interfaces, I get it. But I highly encourage you to check it out. It really is a lot of fun. It's very efficient. It just takes a lot of it's very efficient. It streamlines things, that's for sure. So one of the first things I want to do though is connect, and I've already got some connections set up. So what I'm going to do is what's called a PAC auth list. And so I'm saying, hey, command line interface, tell me all of the profiles that I've already authenticated to, that I've got that are authenticated. What are the profiles that I have that I can use? And so you can see here, I've got this is my default, my Microsoft account, but then I've got these OG DevWorks ones, and these are the ones we're using today. And so you can see here, OG DevWorks Dev and OG DevWorks Test. And that's what we're going to use. And so I'm going to go ahead and crack this folder open here, just my repo folder down here. And I'm going to say, one other thing I want to call out is right now you can see that I am on profile 4. I don't want to be on profile 4. I want to be on profile 2 because I want to export my solution to my hard drive. I want you all to see how this looks on the hard drive, basically, what's happening in those pipelines behind the scenes. So if I do PAC auth select, I say 2, it should put me in my dev environment. Oops. Oh, sorry. PAC auth select index 2. There we go. So now it's put me in my dev environment, and I know that I want to export my solution. And so you can see here, I'm saying PAC solution export, and I'm giving it this path, which is this path that I have open below in my file explorer. And I'm saying export it as managed. That's this last tag here. So I'm saying back it up to this folder, OG DevWorks core components _ manage.zip. And then the name of the solution in the system is OG DevWorks core components. And then I'm giving it that managed flag. And then I can hit enter. And it's connecting me. It's saying, okay, I'm starting that solution export. And sometimes this takes a minute and sometimes it goes pretty quick. So fingers crossed it moves pretty quick for us. But if not, solution export succeeded. Excellent. Okay. So, and you can see down here, I have the solution now on my hard drive. This is what a solution is. This is what's going on behind the scenes. Well, what else do we do in those pipelines? Because we ultimately want to get that code into source control. So we do an unpack. PAC solution, unpack the zip file, and we're going to say OG DevWorks core components _ manage zip, and we're going to export, we're going to unpack that into a folder called solution unzipped, and then we'll take a look at it. And we're also giving it the managed flag so it knows it's dealing with the managed solution still. Oops, what happened there? Sorry, going through my old commands here. Oh, package type manage. That's what it was. I messed that up last time too, apparently. So same thing. Sorry, but on the last one, on that last command, if you remember, the flag was actually just managed. Now it's package type with the value managed. I don't know why that it's different, but it is. Okay, so look at what it did here. It says, all right, we're going to go ahead and unpack that. And it goes ahead and tells us, what all it's unpacking, which is cool. And so we can actually go in here into the solutions unzip folder and we can see, it should look really familiar, right? There's our accident, maintenance, route, etc. Those are all the folders that we just unpacked and stuck into our GitHub repo as well. Okay, so now we know, sitting on my file system here, we've got that new accidents table. So let's go ahead and do this. We're going to say PAC solution PAC, right? Because now we're going to get it ready to be deployed. So we're going to say PAC solution PAC. We could just grab this. We could just grab this other managed solution that we already exported and use that. But the key is that we use our source control as our source of truth. We use our source control as where we get our files for that make up our solutions. We can always go grab an old solution file, but we could run the risk of grabbing a solution file that doesn't have the most recent changes in it. So we always go back to that source control for that, to build our solutions. So that's what I'm simulating here. I'm saying, hey, go ahead, PAC CLI, pack my solution from this unzipped folder, from the folder, we unzip that last solution to, and give me this new, new deployment, this new zip file, this new solution file. So I'm going to run that. And then hopefully that does what it's supposed to do. And it kind of similar to unpacking, for the packing, it kind of does the same thing. It tells us, hey, managed pack complete. You can see here, I now have a new deployment folder. If I double click on that, you can see I've now got a managed solution in there. Then I can take that, I can go back up here to my CLI, and I can say pack solution import, and I can give it that path of that file. And oh, what do we need to do though? There's one thing we need to do. We are on the wrong profile. Remember, we're on PAC auth list. We're on that dev profile, which is profile 2. So I'm going to say PAC auth select index 4. So now I'm on my test environment, and so I can go directly to my import statement, PAC solution import, and point it to that new solution file that we just created with the previous PAC command. And it says connecting. That's great. Solution importing. That's great. Might take a second here, but hopefully not too long. And then what we'll do is we'll hop over to our test environment, and we will see if we have our accident table. And so a lot of times well, you know what? While this is doing its thing, what I would say is I don't have any confirmation yet, but we're trying to build this into a little bit of a series. And so if you have any interest in even more advanced concepts around ALM, please let Tim or Deb or myself know. We're working on something now. I'm working on this with a couple other colleagues where we actually have this project here, and we've got all these PowerShell files. And so we can basically make it as easy as, if we have users who really aren't comfortable working with PowerShell, working with YAML, working with pipelines in general, they can basically submit a simple file that says, that has some certain action mappings in it. Like, hey, I want to export this, I want to import this. And then we can basically just plug it into this series of YAML and PowerShell scripts and have it handle that for them. So it's a work in progress. It's actually working in one environment. But we just haven't gotten it working in enough environments to call it, a completely flexible solution yet. But hopefully soon, and be happy to come back and demo that as well. So this is still important. But if there are any questions, please let's open it up to questions now. And when this is done, I'll certainly flip over and show that it was successful. Tim, did I miss anything in the chat here? I'm looking through it now.
Nope, we're pretty much covered there, I think, Patrick.
Okay, good deal. Thank you.
Okay, well, while we're waiting for that to run, you can give us some feedback on today's session. I just put a link into the chat to complete a survey. If you could answer 3 quick questions about the value of today's session, that would be very helpful to us.
Should have recorded some music for this part.
Mhm.
We have let's see, we could take a look here if anyone was interested. Oh, so I didn't mention this here, but we went through those 2 environments that I was showing, the dev and the test. This is pipelines. And so if you're going to use the pipelines tool, which I highly encourage you do, it's best that you have a dedicated environment for that. There's a few reasons why. I can certainly send you the link on the pipeline configuration tool, and you can dig into it. But yeah, it's good to have its own. And the good thing is it doesn't have to be a managed environment, whereas the environments that you configure with it do have to be managed. The pipeline environment itself doesn't have to be, but let's see here. We'll hop back. I'll keep popping back to my. Hey, there we go. So solution imported successfully. All right, so let's go and see if it made a liar out of me. But we hop over to test and we refresh it. And there's our accident table. And so you can see just by doing that manual process with the CLI to our file system, unpacking it, repacking it, deploying it downstream environment, you can see kind of how all that stuff works behind the scenes. Since I mentioned it was all built on that same kind of technology, those same commands. So, but yeah, that's all I've got, Deb. So I'll hand it back to you, and obviously stick around for Q&A.
Okay, fantastic. I will open up the mics for some live Q&A. I did put that survey in the chat. If you could please give us some feedback on today's session. I also put in the chat our upcoming sessions. So you